Welcome back, everybody, to the Dads and Angels podcast. I'm here with an amazing guest today, R. Glenn Kelly. Ron, Glenn, Mr. Kelly, tell us your story, man.
No, good. Well, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here now. I do go by Ron to all my friends and family, so I hope you will call me Ron, and everyone that's listening in on us too. I am first and foremost a bereaved father. My story doesn't begin from there, but my story, I don't want to say my story will end there either. I've still got a lot of story to go through yet, but I am the father, and I say that proudly. I am the father of Jonathan Taylor Kelly, who still to this day guides me with his legacy every moment of every day. He was an amazing child. I had a story that's probably similar to others and unique, and you know what I'm talking about when I say that. I mean, so many of us have been through things we could say, we've all been through our own single story. Everybody's unique in what they've gone through, but there's others who've been through something similar. But, I had a life where I didn't have a child until I was 35 years of age. I was a young jarhead, then a cop, and off having fun in life, and God decided to bless me with a child late in life at 35. And when he did, he blessed me with a child that had some conditions. He was brought into the world with a condition known as hypoplastic left heart syndrome. In basic terms, that means the left side of his heart had failed to develop in the womb. And in basic terms, the day he was born, the doctors handed him to us and said he's probably not going to make it through the night. So it wasn't a very, very good beginning. We ended up following an ambulance from a local hospital to Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where we learned that they could do some experimental surgeries on him and actually rebuild his heart to function fully on just the right side, so it would function as a capable heart. He went through a series of open heart surgeries, 3 of them before he was even at the age of 2.5. And by the time all that was over, his prognosis was for full life. As you can imagine, that should change a man pretty much the way you'd almost expect it would, going through the traumas of that. It was John going through the majority of the traumas, although, I harken back to the Marine Corps days where they say the only thing tougher than being a Marine is being a Marine's wife. The only thing tougher than being a child with medical problems, I think, is being the parent of a child with medical problems. So we went through 16 years of life after that. And, he wasn't expected to die, but there were some medical issues that he would have to undergo. Long story short, some of the work done on his heart wasn't going to grow with him. As you can imagine, if they fix things afterwards, it's not going to mature as the rest of the heart does. So they had to go in there and tweak some things. And we went in for a relatively routine, and I say that with, the air quotes, because no procedure's routine. You know that.
Right.
We went in for a relatively routine heart catheterization to do some poking around, and he'd been through heart caths before. He came out of the heart cath procedure just fine, and during recovery, his heart crashed, and I lost him. I don't know if others will take as much pure pleasure as I do now with this, but I held my child when he took his last breath.
Wow.
So I got the joy of doing that, and I do call that a joy. I ran around, as you can imagine, in a state of shock like we all do for some time, and turned to a number of things that probably a great many men do until I hit about the 6-month mark. And, I say this with all pride. I was in the shower getting ready for work one morning, and I had pretty much dispelled all ability to grieve my child because, I had 1,700 people working under my command and people that counted on me, and I was tough. I was a former jarhead and a cop, and, I could make it through anything. And didn't grieve my child really for the first 6 months until he came to me in the shower and he said, "How dare you? How dare you not live out the legacies I left behind for you?" During his lifetime, because of his rare heart condition and the fairly new procedure they had done on him, he had subjected himself to a lot of studies and knew himself, even as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, that he was allowing things to be done to him study-wise that would help other children born with the same condition after him. So he was serving, and he knew that. So when he came to me in the shower, he said, "How dare you not live out my legacy?" And at that point, I figured I was going to do that. I was going to live out his legacy. I was going to go and serve. And I had left law enforcement completely and gone to work in the defense industry, where I was actually writing government proposals. And, I had gotten to the point where I had written proposals that had won awards for people in the range of, $350 million for a federal contract. And I thought to myself, if I can write to make other people money, then I can write to kind of help other people that are going through what I'm going through just by telling my story. And there's some more behind that. I'd gone through some what I call self-realization after John visited me in the shower, and I put it all on paper. I put it all in a book, I should say. And it became a well-received book only because, as you know, and God bless you for what you do, there's not many of us, you and I, that will stand up and talk about how we feel as men. And I put it out there, and I received phone calls, and people wanted me to come and speak, and newscasts that wanted me to come on the show and talk about the book and how it is about being a grieving father, willing to talk about how I feel. And it has just gone on from there. And again, I attribute it all to really going back and realizing that John wanted me to live out this legacy. He was there to serve. So I went and did that. There's a part B to that. It's a real brief part B, and possibly some people can understand it. But, I'd gone through the first part of my life in service. Again, serving my country and serving my community. And during those times, I know you'll get what I mean by this, brother. I wasn't for want. It seemed like as long as I was serving, my life was always pretty good. I had gone over to what I call the dark side, left public service, and went over to make money in the private industry. And things didn't go like they did when I was serving. Once I went back to serving, and John came to me in the shower and said, "Go do this," my life has been amazing. It has. This is not for any kind of personal gain. My life has been amazing as far as peace and purpose now. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And even in your voice, you can tell. And we're going to get into a whole lot of the material and a lot of the content that you put out to help dads and help parents in general, grieving the loss of their child. But one of the things that you can definitely tell from anything where you speak is that you're at peace.
I am.
And that gives, guys like myself and Joe from episode 1 in this, I don't know if you would call this necessarily like our industry, but we've all kind of found ourselves in this niche. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, but fortunately so, we've taken steps to, like you said, to serve.
Right.
And I know I've talked to Joe about this too. And Ron, you're kind of the godfather in this industry to us. So we all kind of look up to you, which is why I was so excited to get you on today.
No, I don't want to be that old. You can't call me godfather.
Oh, no. We don't do the old thing. Even though at the beginning I did throw the Mr. Kelly in there just to kind of mess with you a little bit.
Well, I just saw a Botox commercial on TV, so at least I know where to get it now. So I'm okay.
Oh, exactly. And you're talking to a pharmacist too, so we can get you a good deal on it. Uh-huh. So I want to take you back a little bit, and one thing that you talk about in some of your content, and I think I can certainly relate to it, and I'm sure dads, especially dads who don't want to talk about their grief or don't know how to talk about their grief, it's that 3-letter word, ego. Mm-hmm. And how that plays into your message. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll kind of lay it out in the pyramid scheme real quick. But to me, and this is only me, and keep in mind, I am faith-based. And even if you're not faith-based, I mean, you do believe in a higher power. It just depends on what you call that higher power, whether it's, source energy, or I just happen to call it God. But my foundation of who I am really is based off of something you can't take away from me. It's something that'll never change, and it was brought into me as a child through my upbringing that tells me that basically I am a good guy. I'm a child of God, and nobody will ever take, including me, nobody can ever take away that foundation. But on top of our foundation lies our and I'll call the foundation self-worth. It is our self-worth. We are worthy. And if you are faith-based, and you can say you're a worthy child of God. But on top of that, self-worth is self-esteem. And in self-esteem, it's not permanent. Self-esteem is more fluctuating. It depends on your current level of how you feel yourself. If you just got a promotion at work, you feel good. If you got fired, you feel bad. See how it's fluid that way, right? That's our self-esteem. Mm-hmm. But what sits on top of the three, or of the pyramid, the single thing up top, is our ego. And I don't want to think at all, or I don't want anybody to think that we can live without an ego. We need our ego to survive. It helps us get along in social climbs. It makes us dress like a pharmacist when we go to work instead of wearing shorts and flip-flops, if you follow what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's when the ego starts to run us. And I've had a couple of instances where people say that, you've talked about being a Marine and a cop. Are you bragging? And I'm saying yes, because I lived off of a false ego for a long time. I lived off the thought of what Kyle thought of me, not of what I think of me, if that makes sense. I wanted people to respect me for who I was based on what I had been in my life. So the false ego, or the unhealthy ego, really relies on what you feel other people think about you, and not what you think about yourself. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And especially the part where you're talking about what other people think of you.
Exactly.
And I can directly relate to that because of this podcast alone, but any of the other content that I put out, I'm going to put this out. I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Bingo.
And even with little things, it doesn't even have to do anything to do with this. I'm just going to go do something, and I don't care what anybody else thinks about it anymore. Well, and I would not have done that before.
Here's the deal, and real quick before I forget about it, it's very, very important, because I like to credit Dr. Wayne Dyer on this. If nobody follows him, then they'll be amazed where he came up with this. But again, it's faith-based, and I apologize. I do a lot of things that are and are not faith-based. But
don't apologize. This is your thing, man.
ego, edging God out. Basically, when you live off of an unhealthy ego, that's what you're doing, is you're edging God or your true self out of your existence. But where it comes into play for us, of course, is we're men. We're more prone to live off of that ego. We're more prone to go on that first date and try to make ourselves into something more than we really are to impress somebody. It's a natural tendency for guys. As a matter of fact, everybody knows what the number one fear for men and women is. Do you know what that is? The number one phobia for men and women?
It's
public speaking, right?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say embarrassment, but yeah, that goes.
It's public speaking, right? So, and psychiatrists have broken it down, and it's no fair to women, because I'm going to tell you what their number one phobia is for women. It's just creepy crawly things. And the reason why I say it's kind of sad is because that's kind of a weak thing compared to the number one phobia for men. Do you know what our number one phobia is?
No.
You're going to find out that I'm not really who I purport myself to be.
That's deep.
Think about that.
That hits home a little bit.
Again,
go
back to that first date.
I'm getting goosebumps on that one.
Go back to that first date. I mean, who are you putting yourself out there to be? And that even comes back home to us. But where all of this wraps up, ego-wise, is that we live in our own little self-ego, too, where we think that we can't show ourselves our emotions. And that's the biggest part. Nothing that you and I do, and I've looked at your stuff, too, you're never going to tell a man to change who he is. But you're going to tell a man to be who he is, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the biggest thing. When I put out the books and I put out other things, it's like, guys, I don't want you to change. Not that I want anybody to do anything. I'm not trying to tell you that you need to change. I'm just trying to help you recognize who you are. I don't know about you, and I will bet you went through the same thing I did, where around me, other immediate family members with me and my child that I lost were despondent. They were immobile. They were crying all the time. They were doing things that I wasn't doing. And part of my mind said, oh, my God, am I okay? Am I a freaking monster? So now I'm crazy. Did I love my child? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I went through a very similar thing. I mean, just how my wife and I handled it the first couple of months after it happened. My wife she was despondent. I mean, she pulled herself together, but there were times when she was very, very despondent and very upset and very sad. Mm-hmm. And there were times where I was like, why am I not upset? Why am I not crying right now?
Did you ever say, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And our message to guys is there's nothing wrong with you. This is who you are, and it's not wrong. It's who you are. So, in my book, sometimes I cry in the shower. I alluded earlier about John visiting me in the shower. That was the first time that I broke down and cried. I had weep tears, of course, at the viewing and at the services, and of course when he passed. But I mean, during the grieving process, I was never incapacitated. I was never debilitated. I was never so immobilized in grief like others around me. I really did ask myself, did I really love my child as much as I thought I did? And that was really the biggest question that stopped me in my tracks. And I said, of course I did. Oh my God, of course I love my child. So let me figure out why.
Then it gets complex from there, as with your reaction and just kind of how you explained it. That there's multiple different things that go with the ego. How you view yourself, how you want others to view you, what you're doing to make others view you in the way that you think you view yourself, and it becomes, just listening to it becomes pretty complex.
Complex, but fascinating in the fact that you go, oh my God, I get it, I understand it. You look back in time since the dawn of time, and the things that are programmed within our DNA, and now the things that the hormones, the chemicals that marinate in our mind that tell us to do different things than telling the female of the species to do things. And, you just want to say, I understand. I understand why I've been a jerk. I understand this. I understand that. I understand why I lived off of an ego. But the biggest thing, Kyle, really is I'm okay. It's not that I'm different or I'm just unique. I'm not different.
Yeah. And each of us are unique, just like our experience.
Yep.
I do think the only thing that is the same is that one brief moment. And I always try to bring the message from a previous episode in, and every episode I've talked about this and a few other things, but that one moment you find out that your son or your child has passed, I think everyone's brief moment, well, even if it's for a second, that is the one thing, the commonality amongst all of us. But then our stories are so different.
Yes.
And for you, the self-realization and everything that you came across, to me, you are so lucky to have gone through that, because now you can, you pulled yourself up, and now you're pulling so many people up. And you see how many people are watching your seminars and watching your YouTube. Well, we've talked about all the guys watching your YouTube videos, all the women visiting the website and going into all those things. Yeah. But let's take out your broad brush for a second, since we're on the topic of men versus women and the grieving process. Sure. Go ahead and start. I'll let you take it away with painting with that one.
Oh, sure. But real quick, and you talked about helping other people. I want you to realize this, that every time I speak, every time I do a video, every time I go to a conference and do a workshop, it's helping me. It really helps me. I'm still healing. And my message to everybody, some of the most traumatizing things that you might hear from these well-wishers that go by that have been through this before, or those that are in the mental health profession, they'll go, you're never going to heal from this completely. Well, that's true. You're not. You're never going to heal completely from this, but you're going to heal, and you're going to find peace and purpose. So don't think that this thing is just, you're going to be a wreck for the rest of your life. You are going to heal, and it's okay to heal. But again,
and the grieving doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't. It lessens to a point. It lessens in intensity, but it doesn't lessen in deepness, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You just bring your loved one with you as you go, and you learn how to bring your loved one with you. I learned that John is with me every day. I'll probably end up getting struck by lightning one day, because I have a tendency to talk to John more than I talk to God now. I'm standing in front of the mirror shaving, asking John what I should do, and I'm sure God's up there going, "Hey, you used to talk to me."
I'm sure the big guy understands.
I think I'm talking the same thing, so I'm sure he gets it. But the broad brush concept really is just that, where there are so many people that I've met along the way, husband and wife teams, where the wife will look at me and she'll say, you talk about all this, but I'm the one who I can't cry, and my husband can't stop crying after our son lost, and he's completely debilitated, and I'm acting like this. And I have to explain to him that we're all of us are as unique as snowflakes and fingerprints. We're all different, but there are generalities, and that's why I call it painting with a broad brush. If you look at anything that lines up, if the norm is that the majority are going to act in a certain way, then it's easier for you and I to go out there and talk about the norm. And that lays a foundation where we can start talking about those that are a little bit more unique. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we can't.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are.
It's like you got to get to the first level first, and then get a little bit more complex with it.
Absolutely, because now we are. Unfortunately, we hear about gender as more of a PC thing now, but gender is out there, and gender is really, along with men are going to act a certain way normally. Okay, in a broad brush sense, or the majority of men are going to act a certain way, and the majority of women are going to act a certain way. And I say it like this: we all know that men are generally taller than women, but we all know a woman who's taller than most men, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the broad brush thing, right? So there are differences out there. But you've got to take gender into effect too, because gender is not sex. Sex is the sex organs, body hair, breasts, things like that. That's sex. Gender is really the level of masculinity or femininity that you have in you. And we all know men who are, hyper masculine, and we all know men who are down on more of the gender neutral level. And we all know women who are hyper feminine, and we all know women that are down near the neutral area of femininity. And we all know people that almost cross over into the other sex on their actions. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So,
oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
So in order to deal with everyone, if you will, and nobody's looking to deal with everyone, but in order to take everyone into account, you've got to start, before you can start handing out pieces of the pie, you got to start at the pie. So if anybody looks at my work or the work that you're doing and some of the guys that are focusing on helping other men, we're looking at first establishing the foundation, because you can't go out and look at the individuals until you realize the larger group are going to do this, and let's start there. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. It's like crawl before you walk type of thing.
Exactly. Or understand where we came from. Mm-hmm. And then go out from there.
Right. Yeah. And so do you see, as far as your message is concerned, so do you see, I guess, kind of an urgency to really develop a message where it is, okay, here's the broad brush concept. Now, given the climate of gender and everything today, do you see more of a push to start talking about, there are gentlemen who are on that aren't very masculine, that might even lean towards the feminine, and the vice versa for women? Do you see in your message, do you have to have a little bit more detail into that?
Sure. And most of the time in workshops and stuff, we'll start out with the generalities and we'll break it down,
right.
Not waiting for somebody now to ask that question. I've actually incorporated that to let people know, look, we recognize everybody. But things are really coming along well as far as, and I only say this because I thought, and I shouldn't do this, but I thought that's where you were going with the question, but more men are starting to show up now at support groups and at conferences and things like that, and watching what you do, listening to what you do, watching what I do, and it's phenomenal. And this has only been, I've been in this for 5 years now. And when I first started doing this, I would visit a conference someplace, and every guy that I ran into who was a bereaved father would say, well, I'm just here to support her. And after the 4 days were over with, he was a full convert into, I need this peer-to-peer support because this is the most amazing thing in the world. So we're coming a long way.
And that's kind of what I was getting into is, what do you think it is that does bring the men to your conferences and to your content? I know we talked, you just mentioned there how, I'm here to support my wife. And then they kind of like, they walk past the door, listen a little bit, and then you might see them sitting in the back row. But then by the end of the conference, maybe they're in the front row. Are there other things other than just like, not necessarily the excuse, but saying, other than saying, I'm here to support my wife, what do other guys say? Why did they say they've kind of come to you?
I would say, honestly, you and me and the others that are out there doing this for men and realizing that it's okay. And going back to one of your early messages where we talked about, putting yourself out there. I tell other men, look, what else worse in your life can happen to you? Okay. Don't be concerned about any judgment from anybody now. I was still working when I lost John. So about 6 months after, I didn't give a crap what my boss said about me. And it's like, I don't care, whatever, no offense, but hurt me, bring it, whatever. Just,
Exactly.
Then I've learned to actually put that into a positive spin where I can stand up on stage and go, judge me. I might do a backflip and fail miserably, but you know what? I'll stand up smiling because you can't hurt me. All right. You can't do anything worse than what has happened to me now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I kind of reflect on it, and it's kind of my badge of, I kind of wear it like a badge a little bit.
You should.
And when you and I had talked before, kind of doing the, the briefing for this podcast, and we talked about, writing a book and everything. The first title of the book that I had thought of after you conveyed your message with me was, "What's the worst you can do?"
Bingo.
It's what's the worst you can do to me.
Right.
And I've since kind of changed my thinking on that. And I guess, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, but it really is. It's like, I've walked to the gates of hell, man. So there's not much else anybody can really do that will really devastate me.
But it takes a strong trigger. And unfortunately, we've been through that strong trigger, but it takes a strong trigger to make it happen because we're dealing with both nature and nurture. When we talk about socializing, and I won't get into a lot of this, but if we go back since the dawn of time, man did a lot of things where, back in the days of traveling along the Serengeti, he was gone for months at a time, and women were left back in the village by themselves. And, the only way they could protect themselves was to do what? They gathered in groups, right? And today, women are more prone, it's been proven in psychological studies, women are more prone. So it's objective, but I think this subjectively too. Women are more apt to go seek support either professionally or in peer-to-peer groups than men are. Men are just not social animals.
No,
we take meeting with strangers not very fondly, if that makes sense. We don't want to meet with strangers. We're weary of strangers. Once we get together with them and realize they're not strangers, then there's no more aggression to worry about. And these are things that are in our basic DNA, and they're not easy to overcome.
No,
it takes a strong trigger to do it.
It really does. I mean, for me, I have a background in communications and speech classes and all different types of things. So, like, for me, reaching out for help wasn't an issue, but I've always kind of had that thought that, I know guys who had business degrees. I know guys who have hardcore science degrees. If they went through this same thing, there's no way that they would be looking for help or even know where to look or know where to ask or even want to ask for it. It would just be stagnant.
Yep.
And when I think about guys like that, both guys that I know and guys that I don't know, it breaks my heart because I know that they're sitting there and they're hurting,
right? And
there's nothing else to them. There's no forward motion.
No, and the thing is, it's all free. I hate to put it up there like it's a monetary thing, but I mean, in our socioeconomic statuses, some people can't afford anything. But this peer-to-peer support that we've got out there, whether it be in an organized nonprofit group meeting monthly, or whether it be online, whether it be through seeing videos, listening to podcasts. I mean, the support is out there for free. And to be honest with you, you and I have known each other for a short time, but we got a common bond, which, it kind of sucks joining this club that nobody wanted to join, but we'll be friends for the rest of our lives. I've met so many people down this trip who have become lifelong friends of mine who are dear, amazing people. Real quick, I got invited to I didn't go to any support groups or anything like that, but I got invited to speak at a national conference. And my thought process was going into a national conference with 1,200 people there, that I was going to be walking into doom and gloom and a dark kind of environment where people were just sitting around wailing and crying about the loss of their children. And I walked into a complete opposite world. I mean, people were laughing and hugging and kissing. People that come to these conferences year after year to see the same people over again. People that come for support. There was weeping. There were tears. I don't want to say that there wasn't, but it was a joyous thing where people were coming and getting support from people that they'd got to know over the years and just loved. So it was not what I expected at all.
Yeah, it's the network that it forms. It almost doesn't even become about the grief anymore.
Right.
It's just kind of where the grief has led you and where it's pulled you. Mm-hmm. And I want all people who go through this. No one really has a choice whether they go through it or not. You're thrown into it.
Right.
You're thrown right to the wolves. Mm-hmm. But whether grief drags you or grief leads you, I really hope that it leads you to where that utopia you just described.
Yeah, and keep in mind, when you led me into the talk about the ego, and that's a basic thing about when I talk about the ego is there are points, and I know you've been there, Kyle. I've been there where the bottom dropped out of my life, and I'm not talking about the grief event. I'm talking about in my life in the past where I looked at myself and I said, the bottom has dropped out of my life. Right? What did I drop? Right. What did I drop into? I dropped into my self-worth, didn't I? I let ego and self-esteem, let some event tell myself the bottom has dropped out of my life, but I fell self-worth, who I really am inside, and I rebuilt. Apparently I did, because here I am today. So when we go through this, as guys going through this, they've got to realize that the bottom has dropped out of my life, but what I've dropped into is who I really am right now. And what am I going to do from here now that I've been through this loss? Because you're still here, right?
Exactly.
So
when that bottom drops out, mm-hmm. It takes work too.
Yes, it does.
That's the second part. I mean, and not to be dark or a devil's advocate or anything, but it's easy to let when the bottom drops out to just stop.
Yeah.
But at some point you have to, like you said, you realize your self-worth. So what defines you is what you do after that point.
Right. And listen, and I am not crossing over what you said at all, but since we are all different, there are times where it's okay to just stop, okay? And just get yourself together. A beautiful thing that I heard is about music, but it's real simple, that it's not the notes in the song that are the only thing that makes it pretty. It's the pauses in between the notes that are needed to make that piece pretty. It's the same thing that what we're going through. It's not our actions, but it's times we take to pause in between. So we've got people sitting around going, I'm not doing anything right now. Am I failing? No, you're healing. Okay. It's okay to stop and regroup and rethink and go, oh God, I just need a break. I need a beer,
Yeah. Or whiskey.
Yeah. Or bourbon. So.
Yeah, the stopping part, and I'm sure my wife would wholeheartedly agree with you. And I guess I'm at the stage where I'm starting to realize, like, there are points when you have to pause.
Definitely.
I used to think that I operate great with, I've got a million irons in the fire. Mm-hmm. But even up until recent, in the last couple of days, last night, this morning, had to take a break and say, okay. And, and I guess I didn't realize this, comprehensively until, you had just said what you said, but I came to a stopping point where I'm like, okay, I got to stop and be a husband now.
Yeah.
I gotta chill out. I can't always be the shark moving. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I gotta be the turtle just hanging out at the bottom there.
This is the hardest thing you've ever done in your life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The hardest thing you've ever done. And being a pharmacist, you've accomplished some amazing things. And I'm sure you thought that at that point, this is the hardest crap I've ever been through. Why am I doing this?
Oh, yeah.
I went through Marine Corps boot camp, dude.
Yeah, and that's harder than pharmacy school.
I'm just saying that this is the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. So you got to take a break sometimes, First rule, always treat yourself well. Just stop and tell yourself, just take care of yourself.
I'm reading a book right now, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or some of our listeners are. It's Jordan Peterson wrote the book, and he's a fairly controversial dude. But what you just said there, treat yourself like you. What is it? One of his, I think it's rule number 3 is treat yourself like you. Oh God, now I'm gonna have to remember the whole title of it. Like you're someone you're responsible for.
Yes.
And I was listening to it today, and when you said it, it was like ringing that same message. And there's a lot of similar messages between, what you and him talk about. But, we get so wrapped up. And I think there's guys who get into this situation, too, where they are so wrapped up into taking care of the rest of their family,
right.
their wives.
And they have an instinct to. Okay, that's our instinct. That's in our DNA, is to take care of others. It really is. And especially during early grief, when, right after the event, and I hate to speak of it so coldly like that, but just to let people know what I'm talking about. There are periods of time where you are going to have to take that break from yourself and listen to your other instinct going, she needs me, they need me, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. And people get so wrapped up in that going, I'm not grieving because I'm taking care of this or I'm taking care of that. That's who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's you talk about this being the hardest thing that you'll ever do, and wholeheartedly agree. I think it's the most fulfilling because you really do find out who you really are.
Yeah.
And it gets pretty trippy every once in a while, and a lot of times that happens when you take these breaks, when you stop and kind of reflect on, all right, what have I done since then, and what's going on with me?
Yeah.
Some guys accomplish a lot. Some guys only accomplish a few things, but they're probably the best things they've ever accomplished in their lives.
Yes.
And some guys are, I wouldn't say some guys didn't accomplish anything. I think some guys are still looking for that thing to accomplish, and what to look for, and what to do with those idle hands for a little while.
My biggest message early on was that I lived the first half of my life on my ego. After I lost John, I was able to turn that around, and I was able to realize life isn't about that. Life is about unconditional love and has nothing to do with ego. And I tell people every day, I would trade it back and go back to being an egotistical alpha male wannabe jerk in a heartbeat if I could just have John back. But I can't. So therefore, this is just one of those gifts he left behind for me. Is, you know what, Dad, you finally understand what unconditional love is. Now go out there and help other people.
When you have guys that come up to you and say, all right, I've realized there is no turning back, like you just talked about there. Because I know I've come across this. I know, Braden and I, when we talk, we talk about this quite a bit.
Right.
Is, we realize that everything's changed. Mm-hmm. What do you tell people when they say, okay, like how to get over the feeling of I can't go back? What's the first step you tell them to take?
Just tell them that we are going to move forward. You are still here. If they are faith-based people like I am, you can usually get together with people and let them know. Everybody understands that we all have a plan. God put us down here with a plan. We just don't know what that plan is. But I didn't have a plan with my son. I didn't know what his plan was. He doesn't know what my plan is. But I was blessed to at least realize after he was gone for the 16 years that he was here, apparently, he and God respected me enough to let me be part of his life for 16 years, which amazes me. It feeds my ego to think that God thought enough of me to give me that child for 16 years. But the other part of that is, if that's what I believe, if I believe that John had his plan with God, then that means I have a plan, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
That means that there's something that I'm meant to do while I'm still here. My plan is not done yet. There are many of our friends out there who think that they know what their plan are, and God love them. I'm glad they do. I don't know if my plan is something I'll complete before I pass away, or something that I'll meet, or something that I'm doing that I'm supposed to be doing. I won't know until I'm standing up there beside my son again. But all I know is that I'm still here. God put us here to be happy and to love unconditionally. And I'm going to do just that. Yeah. And they should too. we use these words, and some of these words I've used, and I don't like them. We've talked about the new normal, and we've talked about moving forward and things like that. They're tough words to hear when it's early on because you don't want to hear that. I don't want to move forward without him. That's not why I'm here. I'm supposed to move forward without her or with her. It depends. There are no real time cycles in this. None of this healing process is a linear time cycle where you can just go, okay, at 3 months you're going to feel like this. At 6 months you're going to feel like this. But there's a period of time where you don't want to hear anything that Kyle and Ron have to say. Okay, they've got good stuff to talk about, but you know what? I'm not ready to hear that. Then there's a period of time where you've got to have a self-reflection there where you kind of go, hey, I'm still here. Why am I still here? There must be something I'm supposed to do. And then comes a period of time where you go, let me find out what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. And I like that plan, and that goes back to an article that you shared early on in some of the blogs and everything that you posted on your website. There's an article like Carrie Cooper, and you and I talked about this before. Yes. Bigger than you, and the first line of it: at some point in time, at some point in your life, you face something bigger than you.
Yes.
And man, like I don't know, I guess in a way I'm not someone who buys into the God has a plan thing. Mm-hmm. I think, in my I guess my hunting mentor and uncle, he's a preacher down in Kentucky, and he explained it. He goes, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you God's got a plan, mm-hmm. or, God knows what he's doing. He goes, that's not always the case. He's like, I'm a preacher. I know God a little bit. Mm-hmm. I like to think I do.
Right.
And he's walking with you through this. So, that when you have a plan, it's awesome. When you get punched in the face, like Mike Tyson says, everything changes. Mm-hmm. He goes, but God will be with you, and God gives you the tools to take that on.
Sure.
And it's a matter of realizing those things, like what you talk about, that self-realization, dropping the bad parts of your ego and using the good parts of your ego to make that step up and pull yourself out when the bottom falls out. Mm-hmm. Man, it gets when you start realizing stuff like that, the sky becomes the limit, and it's an enlightening feeling.
Well, it makes you realize, and the number one thing that any of us should be talking about with any of our brothers or sisters that are going through what we've gone through is the fact that you're okay. Keep in mind, if we've got somebody out there who is harming themselves in some way or really getting into more alcohol than normal or recreational drugs and things like that. I mean, that's where you start talking about we need to up the ante a little bit about getting some help. But, mm-hmm. For the most part, you and I find ourselves sitting on a couch going, am I okay? Am I going to be okay? I think our number one, preacher point for anybody should always be, I'm okay. And don't for a minute, anybody that listens to your podcast think that what we talk about going out there and letting other people know that they're okay is only for Kyle and Ron. Now that you've joined this club, whoever you are, you're going to become a Kyle and Ron because somebody's going to know that you lost a child or you lost a wife or you lost, a spouse or whatever. But they're going to lose somebody and they're going to come to you because they're going to think that you're an advocate. And you're not going to shoo them away.
No.
You're going to need to know after you get to a point where you're able to move forward yourself that you're going to have to look at that guy who's come to you and said, I've just lost my child, and I understand you've been through it too, because there is nothing better than getting together with somebody else who's been through the fire. There's no denying that.
No.
And when they come to you, you're not going to shoo them away and go, I'm not going to help you.
Yeah. No, you want to help. You definitely, you want to help. And those people, what I found was that there are people that came out of the woodwork that I was like, I had no idea they had lost a child. I've known these people for years. And, one guy, he lives in my neighborhood here. I work with him, had no idea that one of his kids passed away 6 months after he was born. You could never tell by talking to him. But when he told me, I was like, you just have no idea. And the second part of it is, you're right. No one will shoo you away. out of
Right.
just pure curiosity, I tried to Google negative content that people would say about those who lost a child.
Right.
You know, you can't find any.
No.
It's amazing.
No.
And it was one of those homework things that I just wanted to see and see what, you know, what were the conversations that were being had about this. Nobody, which means everyone is out there to help you.
Yeah.
You know, not just the people who have, and you know, the people who can help you in the immediate, you know, the immediate passing of a child is your family, your friends. They aren't going to be around forever. You know, those people, you know, they have to go back to their life. You have to go back to yours.
Right.
But this network and these brothers and sisters that we have, you know, like you and I, or you and Joe, me and Braden, like we are all guys that we are connected for life at this point. Like there's no getting rid of any of us at that point.
No, there's not. It's a not a brotherhood. It's a club thing we talk about. I mean, we didn't want to join the club, but here we are.
Yeah.
You know, once you, and I've said this before in workshops. I mean, everybody sitting in a workshop, there might be 60 people sitting in there, and I will look at one of them and go, right now, I could ask you if you would come to my house and mow my grass because I don't feel very good, and you would do it.
Yeah.
Because you know what I'm going through. And then I look at the other guy and go, hey, I need $20. Can you loan me $20? Go, well, we're not that close. So I thought maybe we were.
I'd give you a $5.
But, yeah, give me a $5. But it is you know, there's not anything good that you want to say, but there is good in this.
Yeah.
There's compassion. There's that understanding that compassion is out there, and it's a horrible thing that had to happen for us to have found it, but we did.
There is a movie. I'm not sure if you've seen it. Have you seen the movie Wind River?
I don't know. I'm not very good with titles as I am like what gets blown up. So if you remind me a little bit what's in it.
So it's a fairly new movie. Jeremy Renner, and you know the Cliff Note version of the whole thing is, you know, they find a young girl who she died out in the wilderness, and there was some tragedy that had happened with her. But they go back. One of the scenes is the police on the reservation are with the dad. Now it's a Native American reservation in, I think, like North Dakota or something like that. And they're talking to the dad. The dad's completely shelled up. Doesn't want to talk to anybody. They bring on kind of that stoic Native American kind of stereotype a little bit, where he's like, nope, not talking to anybody, don't care. And then Jeremy Renner opens the door. He's this main character of the whole show, and immediately the father who just found out his daughter had died opens the door, walks out, gives Jeremy Renner a hug, and you hear this crying, and this guy just like walking through the door, he was a changed man. Turns out you find out Jeremy Renner also lost the child the same exact age as his daughter when he died, or when she died. And that movie, it's kind of an action movie, but it's based around all that. And I remember seeing that and saying, that's Ron's message right there. Like before you and I
going through the fire.
And it was like walking through that doorway. And the more I think about that movie, the more I think like, man, we need to do like a screening or something where it's like, okay, we're going to pause it right here. See how he is? Now let it play, and changed man. But you see he's not alone on the other side of that door, right? Like there's the other guy over there. And it's such a powerful part. I don't think anybody who hasn't gone through it, I don't think they would quite get that message. But I would be willing to bet you the person who wrote that movie, or anybody involved in producing that movie, went through that, because they conveyed it like perfectly. And you know, I think I shared it on social media, on the website. I'm going to share it again just because it's so pertinent to what we're talking about right now.
Oh, good.
Wind River. It's fairly new, and it's really good action movie too.
Okay.
So I mean, we're marketed towards guys. So if you're looking for a good action movie, like Jeremy Renner takes out some bad guys in a pretty crazy way too. So it's it's certainly got this parts of action to it as well.
Well, good. I'll definitely check it out. So good.
Ron, I want to talk about some of your books. Your business cards, like you say, you know, that's your product. Right. That's what you're, you know, when you say, like, you know, what am I? I'm an author. Tell us about your books. Right. And because you just released one of them on audiobook as well currently, right?
I did. The first two I released on audiobook, and the first two are pretty much the two prominent ones. The first one really does reflect what I was talking about when we first came on, which was, it was after I left, or after I lost John, and I'd gone through some self-realization, and I went through some studies. For me, it wasn't research; it was things that I was searching. So I can't really call it research. I was searching for me. You can't research yourself, but in doing so, I went through. I went through some anthropology courses. I got together with a phenomenal psychiatrist who teaches thanatology, or the study of death on the living. Professor out in Memphis, just an incredible man. I did a lot of searching on who we are and why we do what we do. And, when all was said and done, I sat down, and that's when I came to the realization that, hey, if I can write to make people $350 million for a federal contract, then maybe I can write some of what I understand about myself as a guy. And it's not going to hit home with everybody out there, but people are going to see the similarities where they are. And it was phenomenal. Not the book. I mean, I try to be humble, but the book was accepted phenomenally within what I call the grief support community, through all the 501(c)(3)s and the invitations to come and speak, and to be a part of this group and do that and get on a board and do a number of different things. So I did. I joined some board of directors, things like that. But then the speaking engagements and the invitations to be on radio programs. And all of it came from the first book, but all of it came because I was a guy that was willing to say, I hurt, and this is how I'm displaying my hurt. And it might not be what my female companion thinks it should be, but I now understand it's okay, and I'm okay, so I'm not going to beat myself up with it anymore. The second, and that first book was called Sometimes I Cry in the Shower, or I should say is called Sometimes I Cry in the Shower, A Grieving Father's Journey to Wholeness and Healing. One of the things that I'll go back on my ego about was I had an invitation from Trinity Broadcast Network to come and talk about my book, the first book, on their television show. And because I was a guy who still had an ego, I said, yeah, of course I'll be there no matter how far I've got to go. So I had to go for a 6-hour drive to be on TV. But my ego was going to let 6 hours. It was a 6-hour drive from Memphis. I was living in Memphis at the time, so Memphis to Chattanooga. So I got to the show, and it was a wonderful, wonderful program. But the hostess, I remember this ringing through my head, and again, I take it as a sign of faith. But the word grief just kept coming up so much, and she'd say, "Well, Ron, what about Timmy's grief in a situation like this, and what about Barbie's grief in a situation like this, and what do you do with Sally's grief and Joey's grief?" And so I very, very, Kyle, very tactfully stopped her, and I said, "Listen, I want you to know that grief is not an emotion. Grief is just a word. It's what I call kind of a container word that holds all the painful emotions that come from loss. It's just that we use grief now ad nauseum because it's an easy word to use, but it's not an emotion." And she understood it, and I think I got it across well on TV. But now I've got a 6-hour drive at home, or 6-hour drive to go home, and I'm thinking about what I said to her. And on the drive home, I'm trying to think of some visualization that I can use to get this point across to people. And I thought to myself, well, grief is not a word, but it's a container word. What else contains? What? And I came up with a concept of the next book, which is called The Grief Case. And I brought that out as a complete sort of process to take your grief.
Oh, no. No.
If you don't mind me going through this real quick. When you and I had our loss, somebody that we didn't know the day before walked up and handed us our grief case. We didn't know it, but we know it now. It's a grief case that we will carry with us for the rest of our lives. We can never put it down. We can never leave it behind. When we first got it, it was incredibly heavy. It was burdensome. We tripped over it. We couldn't leave it behind. It made social engagements almost impossible at first, right? Because you're walking around with a grief case. But if you look inside of that grief case, you're going to find a number of what I called manila folders, which are your emotions. Just like the word grief, the grief case is not an emotion. The folders inside of the grief case are your emotions. When you first have your loss, all those files are jumbled, they're messed up, they have redundant items in there, they have false anger, false guilt, a number of things that you've got to go through. And it's more elaborate in the book, of course, but you realize that you're going to carry this grief case with you for the rest of your life. But as you go through these files and folders and you remove the redundancies and you remove the false anger, you remove the false guilt for this, then over time, you've taken those file folders down. You'll never get rid of those folders because we're never going to get rid of our grief, but you'll pull the folders down to almost next to nothing. And that grief case becomes lighter, it becomes easier to carry, and it's one where you are proud. I'm proud to set that grief case down, open it up, and look at somebody and say, here's my Jonathan. I am his father, right? That's the concept behind the grief case. That was book number 2. And I'm so proud of that book. I get so many accolades about the entire process and people saying that's just a wonderful visualization of how to process your grief.
It really is. Even the brief summary that you gave there, like it's such a vivid picture of it. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I could have used that a little while ago.
I already got it.
Yeah.
I want you to think of this then. There's one file folder in there, and this is for our listeners. There's one file folder when you first open that grief case for the first time. When you flip it open, you've got that pocket in the back. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. It's already got one file in there that's big and thick, but it's well organized. And you know what that has on the tab? You know what it says on the tab of that one?
What's that?
Unconditional love. And that's a love you had for your child that you lost. And that folder is always there. So when you're having a hard time looking at all those other folders that are down there in the bottom of the grief case,
go to that top
you can reach
one.
back and grab that, and get the support that you need to keep going through it because you've got to process them. Unprocessed grief is a nasty thing.
It is. It's a dangerous thing.
And then the next book that I'm in the process of writing now, which should be out anytime soon, if I can, sometimes I get like the writers that you'd see on TV where it's like, sure, okay, I'm going to sit down and write today. Oh, good, I got a new puppy, right? It is basically it's grief in the workplace, and it's designed for the employers, but it talks about the fact that across America every year, employers, even civic organizations, government organizations are all losing over $100 billion collectively in annual revenue. That's each year over $100 billion due to grief and bereavement in the workplace. And they have no means to combat it. They're not doing it. There's nothing that's done in the workplace to recognize the fact that they're losing that money simply because they don't recognize grief in the workplace. Some do a bit. Some do a wonderful job. I'll tell you about Delta Airlines.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd get into that one. I like that one.
Yeah, but for the most part, it's something that really is a culture change. It doesn't cost the company any money to be understanding and to recognize how to care and feed for the bereaved when they come back to work. But unfortunately, what you and I have been through, other people that haven't been through it don't like to face it because it really does come down to there, but for the grace of God go I.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mortality is a tough thing to face. If somebody looks at what Kyle's been through with Garrett, and if it's a coworker and they are about to have a child, they don't want to think about you.
Right.
Okay? Because it's going to come back to them going, oh my God, what if that happens to me? Hey, let's not even think about that.
Right.
You follow me?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody else has got a teenage boy and they look at Ron at work. And Ron just lost his 16-year-old. Oh my God, I got a 16-year-old at home. Oh, let's not think about that.
Yeah.
Let's just put that aside. That's natural for our species. Is we live in what's called a normalcy bias. We don't expect things to go bad.
No.
Just it's life is supposed to be normal.
Exactly.
We don't. We moved to California even though there's a threat of sliding off into the Pacific. We moved to Oklahoma even though there's a threat of getting sucked up by a tornado.
Yeah.
We don't live for the bad, so we don't want to think.
Yeah.
It's called the normalcy bias.
And employers,
So
they definitely. I mean, I could definitely see how just individuals and employers all have different degrees of that normalcy bias. Certainly.
And Delta is a wonderful thing where I ran into. I got the greatest thrill out of meeting an airplane mechanic down at Delta Airlines who had lost his son. His son was 23 years old. But he was what you would expect for an airplane mechanic to be, just a great guy. And he and a couple other airline mechanics who had lost their children had gotten together and spent quite a bit of the time crying in between the hangars during the daytime, if that makes any sense to you. They would go out there and they called it crying. Big old biker boys, they'd go out, stand in between the hangars, and they would discuss the loss of their children, and they would cry together. They started inviting other people, and over the years it turned into something pretty big. And one gentleman, Tim Moy, took that to the HR department and said, we'd like to organize this into an official group. And Delta Airlines, God love them, they ran with it, said, whatever you need to make it, you make this a peer-to-peer support group. And now currently they fly employees, bereaved employees that have lost children. They will fly them once a year from around the country into Delta Airlines headquarters down in Atlanta. And I'm privileged to be their keynote speaker every year. I go down and I get them for 2 hours, and it's amazing. This will be my third year this June going down to do that. But they are alone in doing that. I've researched it. There's no other company out there just doing anything even near what Delta will do for their.
Which is amazing when you string it back to the whole productivity thing, and companies have figured out that there aren't many more new ways to make money. There are I think a lot of companies are finding out a lot of ways to save money or to save on productivity. I'm shocked that other big companies haven't come up with this for as new age as a lot of the companies talk about Amazon and places like that. Like you would think a lot of places would have something set up like this. I mean, they bought into the ping pong table
they do
in the conference room thing years and years ago. You would have thought that this would be, I guess almost a no-brainer, but maybe it is because of that normalcy bias thing that you don't want.
Well, here's where I get in problems with employee assistance programs. Every major corporation will offer an employee assistance program. You've heard of them, EAPs. They're pretty common out there. And EAPs will offer, basically, they'll offer mental health professionals for an employee that's been through something. The bad side of that is only 2 to 3% of employees eligible to take advantage of an EAP will do that, because EAPs sort of have a stigma to them. EAPs were originally around for alcohol and drug problems, where you could confidentially go seek help. So people tend to shy away from them. So unfortunately, if you're the CEO of a company, and I'm not insulting anybody, but you have been told that your problem has been solved, that you've got employees that have experienced a personal loss, you've offered them an EAP.
The box is checked.
We've done our job. Right, the box is checked. So unfortunately, I tell them, if you're doing that, why are you still losing over $100 billion every year? And then we go from there. And anybody that I get to know over the years that will read this book coming up has to understand that I am not writing this for me and Kyle. I am writing this for the employer. This one hits home in their wallet. But in doing so, we will be supporting the bereaved indirectly, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And
but this one, I talk pure money. You're losing this, you're losing that, you're losing this, you're losing, your corporate reputation, your everything that I can hit them with, just to let them know, look what you're not doing, which could be a relatively cost-free ideology change. Just change, I hate to say it, change your paradigm, hopefully they get into it.
Yeah.
So we'll go from there.
I certainly hope so. And I guess a note on those EAPs, I went to our employee assistance program once. And I remember sitting on the couch like, what the hell am I doing? This isn't helping me. And, I probably wasn't at the stage where that I could have even benefited from that. And from what it sounds like, what Delta Airlines is doing and what companies certainly are capable of doing is offering, different levels of, not necessarily like assistance, because that assistance comes with that negative connotation, but just support and acknowledgement that you have these employees that are going through this. They need help. And in turn, that it's a synergistic thing because they just keep helping one another. Like, I could be more productive at work, and I certainly could have been the first couple of months after everything that happened with Garrett. If there was something that was a little bit more, a little more supportive and less, I'm here for you to listen.
Right.
When you're kind of like when you're looking for answers. It sounds like Delta is definitely on the right track. And I hope other people who are listening to this work for companies or are in the ear of CEOs of companies that can take a page out of that book. And I'm very excited about that book when that book comes out.
Well, I think one thing that Tim and Delta, at least on their corporate level, understood was, this whole thing I keep talking about going through the fire. Peer-to-peer support is so important on so many levels because, number one, we're not alone. If I'm sitting and talking to you, I know that you've got some level of understanding what I've been through, although you haven't been through exactly what I've been through, nor have I been through what you've been through, right? But by God, we both went through the fire, right? So that gives me an idea that I want to hang with you, and I'm able to tell you what I'm feeling right now. You'll understand it more. If you get into, and not to go back and insult the EAPs anymore, but, I've been blessed with going in and teaching, taking over a psychiatry class in Memphis, where his students are actually people that aren't college students, but some of them are coming in because they are licensed mental health professionals that have never been given anything on bereavement in their educational studies in their past before they got their ability to go out and help the bereaved. And that just blew my mind. That made me realize that, hey, at least these people are willing to come in and do it. But these are the people that you and I, and I'm going to tell my age because I say this all the time, these are the people that you and I think of if we flip open a phone book and look for a mental health professional who has grief somewhere on their list of things they help with. They're an authority on this. They're an authority.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, they haven't had that much training on it. And 9 times out of 10, they haven't been through the fire.
You have to have been through that fire to be an authority. I mean,
you do.
You can't. You really, truly.
Now, there's nothing wrong with good psychological education. I'm not going to say that. Formal education in the psychiatry field is a wonderful thing, right? And it can help many mental illnesses and maladies, including bereavement. But hey, my thing is when I look at some of these ads online and I look at some of the ads, all right, screw it, in the phone book. Bereavement comes down after weight loss and smoking cessation, hypnotism, and divorce help and grief.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to somebody who specializes in bereavement support.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You're going to someone who's bereaved.
So, if I stop by Kyle's house with a 6-pack of Paps under my arm, I know that he's been through what I've been through, and we're going to sit down and talk about that. And he understands
Absolutely.
what I'm talking about. So that there's nothing better. And what you do with these podcasts and what I do with the videos and things like that is it gives a chance for these people to come when they can come.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? If you get into the EAPs, God love them. I mean, I don't mean to insult them that much. But you know what? You're going to go on their schedule.
Right.
Okay? So you can come see me every 2 weeks, 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. All right? Well, I need help now. Okay? I can't wait till next Tuesday. Gee, I wish I had somebody to talk to. Let me go flip on a couple of Kyle's programs and see if I can get some help that way. So, I mean, it's
or one of your YouTube videos are what I use are my go-to right now.
I was living vicariously through you. I was okay. Thanks for having my back.
And you talk about the schedule thing. And a lot of times it doesn't happen at Thursday afternoon at 5:30. It's Monday morning.
No. Your grief wave hit you. Your grief wave hit you at 12 o'clock on a Sunday when you're fishing.
Yeah, I would hope that if you're out fishing, that'll help at least a little bit. But yeah, it'll hit you then. It'll hit you right in the middle of the night. It's just
depends if they're biting or not.
Yeah,
they're biting it probably.
That's true. That's for another day on that one. So.
Yeah. So I guess really book 4.5 would be, then I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to write the same book, but for those returning to work, employees returning to work after loss, to give them a heads up on what they're going to go through. And this kind of transitions in between both books, but to kind of give you my story, I was telling you I was writing proposals when I decided to write the book. But when I lost John, I was actually the director of operations in the company, and I had 130 managers, supervisors, and office employees that all reported to me. And I had 20 managers that directly reported to me. And my day before the loss was pretty much the same, where I'd go to work, I'd grab a cup of coffee, I'd go sit down at my desk, and somewhere within the next hour to an hour and a half, each one of those 20 managers would casually stop by my door to say good morning, and then they would tell me what they were going to do for the day, right? And we'd either say, hey, that's a great idea, or, no, you might want to do this or do that. But, to me, it was an effective little work plan. I knew what was going on with my managers. I didn't have to call meetings. I knew what they were doing. We were able to strategize and do everything else. And then I lost John. And guess what happened?
Those visits stopped. Yeah.
Yep. So, if you want to look at it, like I said, it's not everybody's business plan to do it like that. And I certainly understand that. But to me, when that stopped, productivity went right downhill, because I had to revamp how I manage my people every day. So there was an impact in that.
Yeah.
Right? So, that goes to the employer's book, but we have to let the employee returning to work know that too, that look, things are not going to be the same. People are going to walk across the warehouse to avoid seeing you because they don't know what to say. You're going to repeat your story 1,000 times because these people that think that they are within your inner circle, or, even though they didn't come to the services or anything, they're going to ask you what happened. Yeah. So things like that, just to let the employee know what to expect when they go back to work, and not just when they get there, but how to handle it 2, 3, 4, 6 months down the road, because it's going to go on for a long time.
And I don't think I've ever. I was blessed, with our workplace, and our place of work is very supportive. Amanda and I work at the same place, but Braden, one of the other co-hosts for the podcast here, I remember when I first talked to him, he said there are people who literally walk across the warehouse. Exactly what you said. They walk across the warehouse to avoid them.
Mm-hmm. And never think bad of them. They don't do it. They don't do it out of malice. They do it out of being uncomfortable. Okay. And and I know with all the well-wishers out there, sometimes it's the best thing that they do is walk across, because if they don't, they'll end up, we're all raised that if you're in discomfort, I'm supposed to comfort you with words, right? Well, the only problem is I have no idea what I should say, and I end up saying something completely stupid like, oh, well, at least you can have another child, right? I say to those people, the people that talk about those people, it's not their fault. It's not out of malice. They're not doing it on purpose. They're not doing it to be hurtful. It's just a knee-jerk reaction that, my God, I got to say something to Carl. I wish I just knew to shut my mouth, but nope, I can't do it. You like Ron White, the comedian?
Oh, yeah.
That line he's got, that I have the right to remain silent. I just don't have the ability.
Yep. As he's drinking his bourbon up on stage there.
Yeah, but that's how it is with our well-wishers. You just want to tell them, hey, you have the right to remain silent, but I guarantee you don't have the ability, do you? You're going to say something like, oh, you're young, you'll get married again.
Yeah.
Thanks, have a nice day.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And it's funny because once you get past a certain point, and when people like that do come up to you, you run into someone from work that maybe was on leave or something, hasn't quite figured it out. When they start saying that, and you see that embarrassment start to take over, like you're the one to tell them it's okay.
Yeah.
Once you kind of realize that, it bringing some things full circle here, you're at that point of self-realization where you can tell somebody else it's okay. And then, again, it's just another level of growth with
and
this
then you'll get to
thing.
the point, you'll get to that amazing point where you'll say, you can say his name. I want to hear his name.
Yeah.
You won't say it like that, but I mean, that's what's going through your mind. I don't mind him saying John's name. Say Jonathan. Tell me he was an amazing boy. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
So it keeps your child alive. I want to hear his name.
It really does. And things like everything you're doing here does too.
Biggest thing about the workplace is realize that those people do care about you, whether they're within your inner circle or not. Everybody's got care, but they don't go home to grief every night like you and I do. They don't go to home to a place that's different. So even though they care and they might have attended the services and they feel bad, they'll get over your grief pretty quick. And again, it's not their fault, but they will get over your grief pretty quick.
Yeah.
So enough said, brother. I know you're trying to cut it out.
Oh, no. It's human nature with things like that. And I always try to, create some level of, relation to this, but I was one of those employees who had employers that had an employee who lost their son. And, at first it was terrible, and we were the well-wishers. And then, then after a while, it's like, all right, how long are we going to do this? Yeah. And are
you over it yet?
Constant absence, like every year, it's the same thing. When I came back to work, we didn't talk about it for a little while. There was nothing that happened, but I had a breakdown at work one day, and she just turned to me and goes, "It's okay. I know what you're going through," and immediately felt better. And so it's like that level of understanding with anybody listening to this, but you, me, anybody listening to this podcast, the level of understanding that they have for others when it comes to that, it's almost superhuman.
Yeah. And there are people out there that haven't been through the loss that do have this compassion. I mean, they're I'm not trying to say they're rare, but it's still, I mean, those that have been through the fire do understand.
All right. They've got the tattoo, they've got the, they've been, not branded, but they've certainly got a scar or two that, they kind of carry with them. Other people have that similar one.
They're in the club that nobody wanted to join.
Exactly. So Ron, what's the best way for the listeners and anybody looking for help or anybody looking to go to your seminars? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
If they want to get a hold of me, just use my email address and email me directly. My phone number is still on the site as well, but my website is simply rglenn with two N's, rglennkelly.com. And that's Kelly without the second E. It's the non-Irish way of spelling it. So rglennkelly.com. And the email address is rglennkelly@rglennkelly.com.
Perfect. And what we're going to do is on the affiliates website, we'll have Ron's link to it, but we're going to have a whole separate page with it. Ron has graciously shared a ton of content with us. So we're going to create a whole nother page for just that content. A lot of it's really geared towards the people we're trying to target with this podcast. So we're going to keep all that on one page, and then his website as well, so you can access as much of it as you want. And there is what seems to be an endless amount of it. It's great. So you can always go and find something kind of new.
Let me offer you this too. I've got both of those books are out on audiobook on audible.com as well as iTunes and stuff like that. But through Audible, I have a number of free download codes. If you like, I could offer you, if anybody, one of your podcast listeners would like to have an audio copy of either one of my books, let's do 3 of each.
Okay.
I can give you a code for 3 of each book.
Okay. Yeah, we'll.
And then for anybody that wants them for free, I'll email my ebook. It's the PDF version or the Mobi version or what everybody wants. I'll email it out to free to any of your podcast listeners that want it.
That sounds great, and
I'll do that through you so they know I don't have a marketing trap or anything. So I'm not trying to trap their email.
No.
You let me know, and I'll shoot them to you.
No, I think if they've gotten this far in the podcast, they know there is certainly no marketing trap there. But we'll do something on we'll do some sort of release like that on social media, so we can get have everyone take a look at it. Find out who wants to get the book and make sure that everyone can access all those resources. So,
you let me know what I can do, because I'm honored to be on your program, and I am so grateful for the work that you're doing now. And I hate the fact that you and I are able to do this kind of stuff. But I'm grateful you're out there, brother.
And thank you, Ron.
You will you'll have to join me on stage sometime, because there's we guys that will stand up and talk about this are few and far between. Trust me.
I would love that more than anything. Like my wife says, I never come up for air, so I could just keep talking and talking and talking. So one day, man, we will be up on stage together. I'm sure that'd be a dream to be able to help people like that.
All right, brother. So, we'll do it.
Well, Ron, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for listening tonight. We really appreciate everyone taking the time, and a longer episode tonight, but certainly something Ron has a lot of content, helps a lot of people, both husbands, wives, dads, mothers, and all different members of the family unit. So with that, we're going to close it out for the evening, and we'll see everyone on the next episode. Ron, good night, man.
Good night, everyone.